Good morning, Bulldogs. Look at this. We've made it to April. It is April 1st. Everyone says March was the longest year of their lives. I hope you're doing fine. So we're going to start off today as normal, going over the news. I said we're going to be changing it up a little bit, how we do the news shortly. I also thought we should have like a good news feature of the day, because right now all the news is related to the coronavirus. 2% of it is related to the election. I think we could all use some good news stories. So I'm going to try to start that as well. So today's New York Times is sobering, as it's been of late. We have here, the pandemic is the greatest challenge since World War II, according to the chief of the United Nations. We'll learn about World War II. We should be able to still get to it, I think, regardless of how we do things virtually in the year. And then you can see for yourself, I guess. I'll compare and contrast. The president at his presser yesterday warned of a painful 2 weeks ahead, as our death toll in the United States approached almost 4,000, and as it will unfortunately continue to grow. So here's some photos you're seeing of different places throughout the world. Let's go back to the world map that we normally see. Once again, more of the darker orange, which is once again 100 cases for the past week, new cases a day. Hopefully we don't see many more cases into this darker color. So back to the US cases. Now this, every day we see this area where we are continuing to grow and darken a bit. New Jersey is second, in the country for the amount of cases and deaths. Nothing, and we definitely don't want to be first, right? We'll be last and be very happy about that. Stock markets took another small dip yesterday. The New York City death toll surpassed 1,000 yesterday, and cases in New York, 75,000. It mentions Governor Cuomo's brother. If you watch CNN, Chris Cuomo, he's now doing his news from his basement of his house, which is probably a pretty nice basement, but still. And of course, they say lots of people still aren't getting tested, so this number probably is unfortunately even higher, about people trying to get aid, because a lot of people need now, or people are out of work. What's going to happen? So, a lot of people are in this situation. We're not alone, people who are dealing with economic hardships besides your social hardships or anything like that. How are you guys doing with that? My kids are very upset that they can't see their friends or people like that. So hope you're finding creative ways to safely stay in touch. So these are, the big stories. Keep checking this out of things you can do at home. I thought about doing like an assignment with this, but I don't think I'm going to go there. But like, people are playing Animal Crossing. Are you playing Animal Crossing? Let me know. Is that a kid-friendly game? I don't know these things. So besides the New York Times, I wanted to show you for a second the BBC News. So this is British news. So, what is it from the European angle? They have the European toll, so that's, Spain and Italy and all those countries combined, where it's affecting heavily. Past 30,000. Spain stats are increasing. Even mentioning, that what the president in our country mentioned yesterday. Anyone have a birthday during this time? Probably didn't celebrate it the same as normal. How in London a governor was created. They're actually praising the Ohio governor out here. We didn't see that in New York Times, so it's interesting to see another country doing that for the early actions he took. Also here, a U.S. story that we didn't see in the New York Times. A U.S. Navy captain is wanting help. He says a lot of his soldiers, or sailors, I should say, is getting inflicted with the disease. And I believe that's stationed off of the coast of Guam right now. Youth dying. It's never a pleasant story. So don't cut your hair at home. I've seen all these things. Some people say you should cut it at home because this is the time to experiment. No one's going to see it if you mess up. Some people are like, no, just let it grow out. Wear a hat. What are you guys deciding to do? What? No one ever prepared us for what to do when you don't get your hair cut. All right. So today I have two timeline events. We haven't put anything in your timeline probably in a really long time. So I have two events today. If you would put in one, that would be helpful. And they're both STEM related. So I thought that was important. So the next unit that we're going to start, you guys will you get it this week? So you'll start it next week, is the Industrial Revolution. And we'll talk about how that changed society. And one of the big inventions of the revolution was the steam engine. And because of the steam engine, you now had steam ships and steam trains, so that goods and eventually people could get from place to place easier and quicker and more cheaply. And also you had steam engines working in factories to mass produce goods. So the steam engine was like an imperative invention when it comes to why this revolution could happen. So one of the people, right, many people went into how this was created. This wasn't created by like one person, but one of them was Samuel Morey. And he was an American from New England, I believe. I know he lived for a while in Vermont, but I think maybe also other places, New Hampshire. You can check. But he received a patent for a compressionless gas or vapor engine. And that blurry image is actually like an image of him getting the patent for it. So he actually received 20 patents in his life, and it was all dealing with, oh, what happened there? It was all dealing with how to design steam ships. This was the first internal combustion engine patent, so that was a big deal. This actually, I remember in the beginning of the year we were doing like, well, this was patent number this, and this was patent number that, to show like how as the numbers went up, how the inventions changed. We have that in our classroom, so maybe I recorded that in a Google Doc, so I'll see if I can find that. But this was patent number 4,378, and pretty interestingly, it was signed by John Quincy Adams. If you saw yesterday's video, we mentioned Abigail and John Adams. So this was their son. And when he was president, the presidents actually signed the patents. Now, our president is not signing all these patents these days. So this is during the Industrial Revolution, 1826, and that's some STEM history as well. Another one would be in 1854, Charles Dickens, the author from England, had his magazine called Household Words. Household Words comes from a line in Shakespeare. And this was a magazine, and at this time, every Saturday for almost 10 years, it was published. And he started to, instead of like releasing a book all at once, he would put like a chapter or a portion of a chapter every week in his magazine to give people some incentive to buy it. Now, these were only like 2 pence at the time. People didn't really have extra money to buy luxuries during the Industrial Revolution. So it was affordable for most people that could read. So Charles Dickens, we are actually going to read part of Hard Times in this unit. It helped describes what it was like during the Industrial Revolution, especially where it began in England. Hard Times was a satire. It was a little bit comical, a little bit playing off the making extremes out of the conditions of the revolution. But I think you'll still enjoy the part that we read. Both, the economic situation, but definitely the social, right? How did life change because of the Industrial Revolution? That's something you want to think about over the next few weeks. So April is National Poetry Month and National Poetry Writers Month. So you might be covering some of that in your ELA class. I'm trying to find ways to incorporate that into what we are learning on the Industrial Revolution, but also what's going on contemporarily in the world. You're going to have an assignment based on this, where you're going to contribute to what I'm doing here for the first 3 days. So for today, Thursday, and Friday, I'm going to show you a poem, and then you guys are going to add to the slide deck. So I will show you guys that. So Edmond Rostand was a writer and a poet from a wealthy background in France. And he had plays published at the young age of 21, and comedies and tragedies, and also lots of poetry published. So he lived during the latter end of the Industrial Revolution. It affected him differently because he was from a wealthy family. He had a fancy mustache. That's important to know. He actually died in 1918. And talking about relevancy, he actually died because of the outbreak of the flu pandemic in 1918. So even the wealthy succumbed to that flu and pandemic. So the end of his life, he did experience what it was like living through World War I in France. And we're going to discuss how World War I was affected by the Industrial Revolution, how the Industrial Revolution made warfare much more deadly. And during this time, many places were bombed in France and in Europe, including things like cathedrals. So this poem is about how even when it's destroyed, the cathedral still shows some beauty, and he calls the enemy morons, which I appreciate. Now, of course, this is translated. He wrote it in French. But he also makes a few Greek references, or ancient references. All they did was make it a little more immortal. A work of art doesn't cease to exist because it's destroyed by a moron. Ask Phidias and ask Rodin. Whether seeking their work, we don't say, that's it. A fort dies when we dismantle it, but a ruined church is always beautiful. And, looking upwards, we recall how the roof looked, but prefer to see the sky rather than stones full of holes. Let us give thanks and admit that we previously didn't have monuments like those the Greeks have on their gilded hill, a symbol of beauty sanctified by an act of abuse. Let us give thanks to those who aimed their stupid cannon, since the result of their action is shame on them. But for us, the building has become a Parthenon. When I read this, I actually thought of Notre Dame in Paris last year as it burned. Not an act of warfare, but still. So if any of you go to a place of worship, whether it's, excuse me, a church or a temple or a synagogue, you may have noticed, right, them being closed. Maybe you live stream your churches, but how has the way you practice religion, if you do practice, been changed by this? And so I just found a photo of a church from the coronavirus, getting disinfected. So what I was trying to do is take this poem and then sort of take an image of what's going on now and sort of merge these ideas together. So that's what you'll be doing. I'll give you 2 more examples this week, and then I'll give you later directions. And this is not your assignment for today, but I'll explain that with the next video for you guys. So I have one more slide, and that's on what you're doing today. Oops, maybe it's not here. All right, so today you're doing an actively learn. So I will tell you what you're going to do. Actively learn is about the Venezuelan revolution. Last year, so my sophomores learned a lot about this Venezuelan revolution because it was current, it was going on at the time, and it was good to compare and contrast with the French Revolution and the Haitian Revolution, and to some degree the American Revolution. This year we had bigger news stories to deal with. The primaries, but then of course the coronavirus. So we really didn't discuss the Venezuelan revolution, but it's good to at least know that it's been going on. That's important. Actually, since I created this assignment the day teachers had to go into school before, we were told that schools were closed. And more news has come out since on the Americans' role on the Venezuelan revolution. So I will update you about that on the next video, but I want you to read this first. So there's only 8 questions, but that means like every question is worth a lot. So don't rush through this. Don't just guess. Try to make sure you have the right answer. When there's one short answer question, and a lot of people don't realize like how these short answers are graded. So Actively Learn, we grade them for incomplete, basic, proficient, and advanced. So if you put a sentence fragment or, nothing, it'd be incomplete, right? Or a wrong answer. If you put like a very brief answer that sort of addresses it, that's basic. You sort of get it, good, that's proficient. Extremely detailed, lots of examples, that's advanced. So, if you want to try to do your best, which I know you do, when you do your short answer, make sure you're including, if it says compare and contrast, make sure you're comparing and contrasting, listing examples that are specific, not just too broad or vague. If you have any questions while you do it, I'll be on the computer for most of the school day. So you can check and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. All right. I hope all is well. Feel free to check in, leave a comment, whether it's on the video or on Canvas or in Classroom or an email. I'm going to ask you guys for more feedback again so I can continue to try to adapt as we go through things. And I hope you're adapting well as well. All right, guys, stay well.